We're going to start this meeting today. The invocation will be by Mr. Bo Ives and the pledge by Lance Thompson.
Would you bow your heads, please? Heavenly Father, we thank you for all your gifts. Please be with us as we deliberate on our business today. Be us mindful of our staff as well as the county that you represent. Please make us decisions that are pleasing to your eyes. And please be ever watchful of our member who's not present today, Dan Gray, and help him through his recovery. And these things we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen.
My voice carries. I don't know if I can.
Say anything.
Some voices do carry, but if you don't speak into the mic, we will not have the recording of your voice. So we do need to try to do that. Thank you, Esther, for reminding us. Attached for your review that you saw on your iPads that's been sent out is the agenda and information packet. The purpose of this workshop is to review the salary step plan. So, Mr. Knight?
Thank you. I'll kick this thing off and then I'll turn it over to the ladies. Did 99% of the work. Back probably 6 months ago, we were having extremely hard time finding mechanics. We went to Florence Darlington Tech to a job fair. We talked to them about what Tech over there offered. Even came back and talked to Tech here about starting some type mechanic school program. And that has now, we've been working on that probably a year and a half with them, and now that's coming, looks like that's going to be a real thing. We did a letter this morning to Mr. Leatherman, and apparently they're looking at some state funding on that. But we kind of looked at what we did on mechanics, and through the job fair up there, we found a lady that was just got out of the military. And so we interviewed her, and we hired her to run our fuel truck, and we looked at the mechanic and kind of fixed that thing. Then the next thing we run into was finding CDL truck drivers, which is, if you got a CDL license in this county, you can get a job and just about name your price. But then we were having trouble there, and I told Nanette and Jan, I said, we need to look not only at the truck drivers, go back and look at mechanics, and while we're looking, let's look at our entire pay range and figure out where we stand and what we can do. And they started putting this thing together, and then Bill decided he was going to retire and enjoy life, and I took the position that we did on the reorganization. And with this plan, we're able to put it in place, utilizing, not filling that position. We can cover the plan and end up with about $22,000 in savings. So all of coming together is giving us an opportunity, I think. And the ladies will go through this thing and tell you how they came up with it. They've put an awfully lot of work in it, gathering information. And there's two ways you can do these plans. You can do one in-house, compare as much information as you can get, and they will tell you the information they utilize, so you can pay an outside gun to come in and do it. And I think I've read where the school board is paying maybe $75,000 to do that, their study. Conway is looking at doing an outside study. So everybody is looking at certain parts of their organization. School board is gonna be probably the teachers of starting salaries. The cities and the counties now is going to be police officers. And Steve said it best one time in a budget here. He said, how can my guys working on roads go up against guns and badges? You just can't do it. But I think it's a good plan. We have initiated these figures. They're in our projected budget, and it was easier to put it in up front than try to put it in later. So it's just because we've done that, we're not saying it's going to be done. It's going to be your recommendation, but we did it because we had to get the budget turned in downtown. But it's a lot easier to put it together now than later on. And if it meets your approval, I would like to go ahead and put it in place prior to July 1. Then when we start the new year, everything's in place for the new year instead of trying to get it started in the July time frame. But we can discuss all that, and I'll ask Jan if she'll kind of go through the sheets and tell you exactly how they came up with what they got.
Right. And stop me anywhere if you've got any questions or don't understand something, because I know this can get confusing. Of course, the first page is just the organizational chart. As we've revamped it with Mike now overseeing the landfill operations. So this is just an updated organizational chart so you can kind of see where everybody is, where all the divisions lie, and just so you have an understanding there. Page 2 is where we'll kind of start our focus. As Danny mentioned, the one thing that we took a look at is we tried to compare our positions to the city of Conway, Georgetown, and Horry County. Danny wanted us to primarily focus, kind of mirror ours towards Horry County. The only problem we kind of had with that was with a couple little areas, one being, as Danny mentioned, the recycling truck drivers or the CDL drivers. Horry County doesn't have any recycling truck drivers. The city of Conway does, and that's probably been one of our biggest competitors is hiring against the city of Conway. When you see what our minimum is currently, $26,925, in the city of Conway's is $32,390. Big difference there in the starting pay. And that's what we were looking at. What we were trying to do here is get our minimums up to where they needed to be. So that way we were competitive with the city of Conway. We offer the same benefits as the city of Conway, so we knew that we needed to get our minimum up to where it needed to be. So that's why the yellow is on the city of Conway, because we actually use their minimum as our comparison. Same thing with Georgetown. Environmental specialists, as you can see. Horry County doesn't have an environmental specialist, and these are the environmental specialists that work with our landfill gas system. And so therefore, we didn't have anything to compare it to as closely with Horry County, so we chose Georgetown County. And in doing so, we contacted Georgetown County and got job descriptions. Did the same thing with the city of Conway. We got job descriptions so that we were sure that we were comparing apples to apples. And we, like I said, we wanted to be able to find something that was in comparison that we knew that we would have to be competitive with. And of course, down at the bottom where you see the trades worker ones, those actually are site attendants. Again, trying to find something to compare it to with Horry County was difficult, so therefore we chose Georgetown County, which was the next closest comparison in job duties and responsibilities. But other than that, we definitely mirrored ours towards Horry County as much as we possibly could. I'm taking into consideration, of course, their size versus ours as well. But that's where we started this whole task, is we wanted to go through and compare where their minimums were compared to ours. And like I said, we did choose many different job descriptions that we took a look at in comparison to make sure that we were comparing apples to apples. And as you can see, Ours were well below. And like I said, and that's what we wanted to do, was to get our minimums up where they were. I want to remind everybody that our annual increase, our 3% increase each year, is based on our minimum, not on our current pay. Each year when we get a increase, it's based on that starting pay. So this will help to each year, each employee will actually see a little bit more each year in their annual increase when their minimum is increased. And that's what we were trying to do here, get their minimum up to where it needed to be. So when we're trying to hire a new position, hire somebody, a CDL driver, we've got a very competitive starting pay for them. We offer excellent benefits, of course, to go along with that, but that at least gets our starting pay competitive with Horry County, City of Conway, and Georgetown. So that's what we were doing here, and that's what we took a look at.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, please.
Are the positions identified individually, or are they grouped together in grades for the ranges?
Right, we have them grouped together in grades, exactly.
Okay.
We have a step plan, which is broken out by grades, and then, of course, based on your number of years, you're in a different step. Every year, you move to a different step. And then what we did is we actually, as we were going through this, we did combine, like, all the managers are the same pay grade. Different steps depending on the years. All the supervisors, same pay grade, that type of thing. So we did do some cleanup, a little bit of cleanup, as you'll see as we go on these next pages. You know, all the trades workers are the same pay grade, you know, that type of thing. So you'll see that as we go on these next pages. I'll start saying, we'll flip over to page 3.
Before you go there, the step grade has to do with the state, doesn't it? Or does it have to do with county?
This one, I think when we started this, we did this more along the lines of the county's pay grade scale. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that's where your step raise comes from. You based it on the counties?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Well, the format is kind of the same. I think the percentage between a step, like step 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, ours is
It's 3%.
3%. So everybody may have a different range that step up is, or a starting minimum. And on this sheet, like on page 3, at the top you see an accountant. Well, there's a person in that position, but we have numbered them 1 through ever how many employees we have, because you really can't make public an employee's salary that makes less than $50,000. Now, we can get that, there's no secret to the board, but in a public meeting, I had to do it like this to where it wouldn't be public information getting out on somebody's individual salary, but each one of these numbers is a person. If we would run the pay scale, pay plan, you would actually see a name in there instead of a number.
Right. And looking at the first one, looking at an accountant, as you can see currently, both accountants are at a current grade 15. Different steps, of course, based on the number of years they've been here, experience. If you go to the very end in the yellow, we're adjusting them up a pay grade. They're going up to a 17, from a 15 to a 17, but you'll see they actually went down in steps. And that's because what we were trying to do was get them into a step as close to what they're currently making. So it's not necessarily, it's giving them a little bit of an increase, as you can see, where you see it says adjusted annual difference. That's what they're going to see a little bit right now. But what we're really trying to do was get them into a new grade with a new minimum, but at a step currently close to what they're currently making. So what they're really going to see annually is that increase, that 3% increase each year will be based on a new grade, which will give them a little bit more each year on their annual increase. We weren't trying to give out great big, huge raises right now, as much as we, like I said, we were trying to get the minimums up to a competitive rate. That's what we're trying to do. So that's where you'll see the changes in their grade and in their steps. Their grades went up, but their steps went down. And like I said, and that's where you can see, like I said, if you've got any questions about, where anybody is or anything different, probably where you'll see the biggest increase, as you can see, is in a minimum. If you go down to the clerks, and you see that we have a clerk that's currently at a grade 11, but they're at the minimum. Maybe they've just started with us. You can actually see that they're going to get a bigger increase because they're going now up a grade, but they're still at the minimum, because you're at the minimum, your minimum's going up. And so they're gonna, like I said, that's where you're gonna see the biggest increases. For those employees that are at a minimum, they're gonna go to a new minimum, which is a higher minimum. So they're gonna see their bigger increases immediately.
What did you use as your basis for determining what grade step they should be? Did you look at a percentage increase? What was the thinking behind the adjustments? in the
Well, for the
steps?
grades, we used this comparison, where we compared it to the other municipalities. And then as far as the step, we tried to put them in a step closest to what they're currently making. And like I said, we didn't go down, we went up. As you can see, for instance, if you look at the clerk, the one that's at a grade 11, step 12, their current rate is $16.72. We're gonna move them up to $16.83. So we tried, like I said, they went up a grade, but they went down in steps, because we tried to get them into a step as close to what they're currently making.
Because in concept, I see where you're going here, but my objective would have been to give them a 4-year forecast. This is where you'll be in 4 years, rather than this is what you'll be next year, so that we gradually move in this direction, rather than suddenly this year we're in a new.
Step plan, we'll look at that. If we
And that's why I'm asking about your steps, how you arrived at those steps, because I would like to see a gradual plan rather than an overnight plan where everyone gets adjusted to the new minimum.
Okay, so you'd rather see something, kind of explain to me a little bit more about, so you'd like to see something where we did more of a gradual?
Right. So they could see that their pay was going up, and that's our objective. But rather than overnight changing their pay scale, we would do it gradually over I said 4 year because I'm pulling out the year, but I'm saying over a gradual period that we could all agree to, rather than adjusting it overnight, so that everyone could see where we're going. And in that 4-year period, we could still compare it to the county and the city and see where they're adjusting, because as you pointed out in your presentation, they're all doing pay studies right now. So if we adjust everything to what they're paying now, next year they're going to be changing.
And you're exactly right, and that's one of the things that we've talked about, the fact that trying to keep up. You're exactly right, trying to keep up, because we realize that that's going to be a problem from here on out. Getting us to where we need to be today is one step. It's just getting us caught up and current to where everybody is currently, but keeping up with where everybody's going is definitely something we're going to have to look at in the future.
It concerns me when Danny made the opening presentation, they were eliminating a high-paid position. The net change is going to be $22,000. I'd like to see that differential closer to what that individual's pay was, rather than taking advantage of that position that we're shifting to adjust everyone's pay, because it makes perfect sense the first year, but 4 years out it doesn't. But I would like to let every employee know where they're going and their pay raises, that we're going to try to adjust those that seem to be out of step.
Any employee can take the step plan. They'll know what grade they on. They'll know what step they on. You get a step with a satisfactory evaluation. Everybody gets evaluated. If you're satisfactory, you get a step. You can look at that step plan and I say, well, I'm on step 6 right now. And if I continue to do the job, I can look across here to, how many steps are 15? 25 steps across the scale. And if I can stay here each year, I can see where I'm going to get to. Now that step plan helps another situation too. It kind of, if you start out, your minimums are in the right place. That step plan keeps you up with the growth and the consumer index.
Danny, I see that.
Progression.
What concerns me is some of these proposed minimums are 10 and 20% above current. That's just a huge adjustment. And rather than see 20% in 1 year, I'd rather see 5 over 4. And it's just a
And we can, those higher numbers,
the ones that are really desperate and change are the ones that I'm.
And those are the positions that we're having difficulty filling. That's the problem, is the CDL drivers. That's probably the ones that you'll see the biggest increase in, is your recycling truck drivers, because that's the position we're having difficulty hiring. And so therefore, to get us up to a competitive rate, we've got to raise that minimum up that much. And I understand. I mean, like I said, we've looked at it, we've said, those are the positions that are seeing the largest increase immediately, because, like I said, that's where we're having the difficulty filling the position. Here's a copy of the step plan if they want to take a look at that.
And Mr. Ives, if you look on page 4, you'll see some of the largest ones with our HEO3s. And these are the truck drivers. And so what we're attempting to do right now, truck drivers are at $12.94. And we can't hire anybody. I can't find anybody that will come to work for that amount when you can go anywhere else and make much more. So what we're proposing is to bring it up to what is current with everybody else, about $16. So we've got employees now that are doing the job for much less than $16. And in order for me to hire somebody that has a CDL, that has any type of experience, we're going to have to go to 16, which is the going rate. And a lot of places are even higher than that if you look at the construction industry. So it's very difficult not to increase the current employees at least to that amount if you're going to hire somebody at that. Does that make sense?
I see where
Yes, sir.
you're.
So if we did it gradually, then that would be saying that you're making $14 an hour because you've been here a couple of years, but I'm going to hire somebody brand new who's never been here for $16 an hour.
I was really talking about page 2, our supervisory positions, that are going up 10 to 20%, that have existing people in them. I don't want to discourage them from seeing adjustments. I just would not like to see it in one jump, is my point I'm making. Thank you.
And
But I believe there's special conditions that we need to adapt to because of the market.
Yes, sir.
and there's different techniques to get there. In the past, I've seen where you would phase that in a little bit. You would, if somebody was going to get a $3,000 raise to get them to the minimum, then you would raise it over a 3-year period. They'd still get their step. But if you got a person in that position and they're working for less, then how long have they been working at a lesser salary than they should have been getting? And to hire, and we talk about benefit packages. I've seen people leave a job for 25 cents on the hour and give up insurance. These young kids, all they looking at is what's in that check. They don't, it's the retirement, the benefits. When you hit about 40, you start thinking about, in a family, you start thinking about the benefit.
Are you
package.
putting the value of their benefits on their paycheck so they can see that?
Oh, yes, sir, they see that every week, and
Because those benefits are a significant amount of their pay that they're not getting in their bank.
Sure.
And they should
Oh.
be aware of how much you're contributing over and above their salary to their well-being.
But if somebody offers a truck driver a job and he said, I'm making $15 an hour now, and he said, I can pay you $17. Well, he ain't too worried about the benefit package, even though we know that it's, 25-30% that it's costing us. But they have to get in another age bracket before that really makes sense to them.
That's true. I've heard a lot of them talk about that, and it's sad that they don't see that, because you're right, just like with the county and the cities, the benefit package, if you add to that salary, would make it competitive, but you can't get them to see that, which is sad. But we do have to look at it and make sure it is sustainable, and phasing it in most positions, I agree with Mr. Ives, is probably going to be more sustainable for us, even though there are certain positions that you can't fill that we're going to have to. We're going to have to do that, truck drivers or whatever. I can understand we can't. And if you even explained it to them that you're making this an hour, and because your retirement and your insurance and your whatever, if you average that, it really means that you are making that. To certain jobs and people that work in those jobs, you're right, he's right, it really doesn't matter. They don't care if they have insurance, they don't care if they have retirement, they don't care what that is, which is sad on their part, and we can't adjust it completely at one time just because of ignorance, but some things we're just gonna have to have.
Those that we're competing against, so they have a benefit package equal to ours, or maybe even better, do they not? Is that what we found?
I've
Especially-
never seen private industry that had one that equaled the government benefit, is there?
Well, the city of Conway being the main one that we're competing against with drivers, and they have the same benefit package that we have. And yet their starting pay is about $3 more an hour for their truck drivers.
I think Marion Foxworth said it well one time. We was going through this routine downtown, and he says government generally paid lower salaries, but they made it up in the benefit package. And then when that kind of gets flipped over at times, and but it's got to where now, with the younger crowd, that starting salary means a great deal. And to hire a truck driver, well, I can give you this today, and if you stay here another year, you'll get another boost to get to that minimum. He's gonna go to Waste Management or Conway or someplace else. So we interviewed a guy with CDL, and he pretty much told Rodney that you've just insulted me. I can go to Walmart and make more than this. And it's true, where we are, and when you see all these strange colored dump trucks on the road today, economy's good, but
I
the
commend you on
demand's there.
systematically looking at the market, because I'm going to draw an example to a particular jurisdiction, but I was a little bit concerned with the city of Myrtle Beach when they drastically increased the pay of their officers, not because it wasn't due, but because they did it in one step. And what they did was change the market, because now everyone else is out of step. So systematically, we've looked at this, and that's important, because we don't want to be the needle that's changing the market. But in this particular market, the 5 largest employers are all public. It is the school system, it is the colleges and the universities, it is the county, and yet Walmart's like 6th, and they have units everywhere. So this market is, the preponderance of the workers in this county do work for one political jurisdiction or governmental entity or another. So we do need to be mindful of that. But we also need to be mindful that even though this is an opportunity, a big step in 1 year only creates that drag going forward. And if we adjust it gradually, that the employees can expect that increase in a certain amount of time. We're adjusting because the market we realize the market is, we're out of step with what the market is. But we'd like to gradually get there is my point. Thank you.
Well, thing I've been looking here and studying is we're an entity of Horry County, correct?
We're what?
An entity of Horry County?
Yes, sir.
We should be at least in line with Horry County, correct? Which is what this new proposal is putting us to?
Yes, sir.
The accountant here should be the same thing as over there?
Right, and that's exactly what we're trying to do, mirror Horry County, starting pays, yes, sir.
Well, I will never be in favor of increasing minimums without bringing up existing teammates or employees to that level, because I know that's a morale
Exactly.
killer. I've seen that happen.
agree.
Where if you've been working 3 or 5 years, and then somebody gets hired brand new with no experience making more than you, that's an absolute morale killer. Do we have any idea on the numbers of people that would drop out of the range if the change was implemented? I mean, obviously, if you got an accountant that's already been here for 5 years and you change the starting pay, that they may not drop out of the range. So
All right, when you say drop out of the range,
Well, you're talking about raising the minimums for
Right.
truck drivers, then, that one particular, you may not have any truck drivers that are already making above that minimum, but in
Right.
other departments, you may have people that are making above any kind of minimum change that you wouldn't be talking about the drastic increase that you would be to bring somebody up to the minimum
and I
if
think,
they dropped out.
and I think we had, if I'm understanding correctly, I think we had two positions, and then if I remember correctly, that, actually, our minimum was a little bit more, if I remember correctly, I think it was a clerk and, or maybe, it was a, administrative assistant, I think is what we had. We had maybe our fleet manager, I think, were the two positions where we actually, our minimums were actually above the counties, if I'm following that correctly. Those were the only two positions that we had that were actually above, and like I said, I think we did increase them slightly just so that they did see a slight increase.
But I don't think moving any minimum up put that person above anybody else in that grade, whether it's truck drivers or supervisors, I think.
That's
he's
right.
Speaking of. Because, yeah, that would be the first thing that would really hamper a study terribly bad. But any pay plan that you develop, if you take this step plan, and everybody says, well, an employee shouldn't make more than his supervisor makes. Well, if that employee's been here 30 years, he's at the other end of the scale. You hire a supervisor in somewhere around minimum, that employee could make more than the supervisor, and that's so in any pay plan or step plan that you work up. But I think they were very mindful on if they moved a minimum up, that the person, he may get more money to move than his coworker, but he wouldn't put him over that coworker's salary.
That's right.
And it's the entry-level people that's getting the biggest bite. Somebody you just hired that was at a minimum, and now we're moving that minimum forward so many dollars. They're the ones that you will see in here that's getting kind of the biggest bite, whether it's in HEO 2s, 3s, or the truck driver, anything. That's where,
If you look on page 6, we've got a breakdown that shows you the percentage of the increases, where it's basically hitting. As you can see, Danny, I use Danny's term as rank and file term. As you can see, 76% of this increase, that's where it's going. It's your landfill and your landfill workers, it's the MRF workers, it's the truck drivers. That's where the majority of this increase is going, is back to them. And this is what we wanted to see. They're the ones that need it and deserve it. And so, like I said, that's where the biggest percentage is going, is back to them.
But going back, I mean, we're looking at, again, start at the very beginning with the accountant. That's the current rate, that's not the minimum.
That's right. That's exactly.
So I guess the piece that I think I'm missing is what the range for that grade is. If there's a grade 15, isn't there an attached, you said they were all grouped together, so there's a certain number. So is there a range of pay for that grade 15? Where it, okay,
There is.
but that's not in here.
When you,
It is
like,
not.
no, where it has like their minimum, the mid, and the maximum, should be on that
Right.
step plan that we were just passing around.
So,
Not here. It's
so
the
should-
25 gradations.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. There's different steps. Like I said, each year you move up a step. And so, like I said, and like I said, based on your evaluation. So there's definitely, there's a whole range. And as you can see, currently, they're in the grade 15, and one of them's in a step 12, one's in a step 10. But we're proposing them to move up to a grade 17, but down to step 9 and step 7. So we're moving them down a step because we're trying to keep them at their current rate of pay.
Or as close as we could get to it.
Exactly.
But what that also shows is each year, their annual increase will be more because it's based on a 17 grade versus a 15 grade, which is how we're gonna, if you approve it, is how we're gonna present it to the employees. It may not be a whole lot of money right now, but every year you're gonna see a larger increase because you're in a higher step. And it's gonna make us is a whole lot more competitive. Because, 5 years ago, any position I had, I could have, it was 25 to 50 applications for any position. And now we're handing out flyers. We're going to job fairs. We're working with the unemployment because they have a program where we can train people. We're going to take somebody who has no experience maybe and train them because we just can't find anybody.
Looking at upper management on page 6, 13% increase, we've eliminated positions, but upper management as a group has increased 13%. That implies a pretty substantial increase for that.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm concerned about. And I would suggest that maybe we do this over 2 years or something.
That's-
Something so it's stepped and it's not a sudden impact, but everyone has a reasonable expectation of getting there because we realize the market is out of step with our current pay. But you'll need to stick with us to see the full impact of it over a period rather than just leap with us for 1 year as a suggestion.
What I'm not familiar with, I guess, is the step process, because in my experience,
That range.
if we've got a position that's mowing the grass, and that position's a grade 1, and the salary for that, or the wages, is $10 an hour to $15 an hour, and that's what that range is. And we may have somebody at $10 an hour, and we have somebody at $12 an hour, and we may have somebody at $15 an hour. But to me, the shift should be in those ranges, and then that's what I was talking about falling out. If you got somebody that started at $10 an hour, and now we're changing that range to 11 to 16 instead of 10 to 15, they're going to drop out of that range. They would at least be brought up to that minimum, because you don't want anybody coming in
Right.
making more than them. But this looks like, rather than making a change in the ranges of the pay, we're talking about individual positions that are getting increases kind of across the board from their current rate of pay, no matter how long they've been here, up to a new rate of pay based on something. But the range is what I'm kind of focusing on.
Exactly.
And
and that's-
I'm not,
And this was, like I said, if you take a look at the step plan, we start normally, depending on experience, if we start everybody at the minimum.
But
That's,
we have we've got a form that shows how many people's in grade 7, how many people's in what jobs are in grade 8. That's what he
right.
wants
And then
to
the
see.
range for that grade 7 or
Yeah.
grade 8, and then where those people fall in that range. And then if
No
the-
one in this plan falls out below. They were moved up, but we could not afford to move. If John Doe moved up the minimum and he got $2,000, we couldn't move everybody $2,000 across the whole board. It'd cost $1 million.
right,
We just couldn't afford that.
right.
So what they did, they moved the person, started to move the minimum up, and then if they fell between a step, they moved them to the next step. They didn't reduce any funding that they were already getting. They just bumped them to the next one. If they were halfway between, they moved them to the next one. But we had to move the minimum up. And in a pay range, sometime with the cost of living, you just shift, if we got a 5% cost of living this year, they just shift the whole pay range 5%, because everybody would get it. But I think the form that she's getting, because the mechanics is in a pay grade. And on the mechanics, we broke it down to A, B, and C. We broke them down into 3 different categories based on how many certificates they got, or qualifications, or, and to get to the top, you got to have a bunch of them. But that gives them an incentive to go to school, move up, get another certificate, whatever it may be.
Danny, talking in the ranges, and we're moving the minimum. Is anybody in these ranges, will they max out? Will they be at the top of their range?
Long
and
time.
then- And then can't go anywhere else and end up
Sure.
staying in that range?
No,
If they
it's-
get a new job or something?
As a matter of fact, by changing it this way, it actually, what we've done is we've increased their grades, but people have moved back in steps, so it actually gives them a longer time before they would even max
So
out.
you change that range so that they don't max out by what you do.
Well, and we didn't even change our ranges at all. We didn't change our actual step plan at all. All we did was, if you were, maybe you were at a 15, and we bumped you up to a 17, but we moved you down, so you were at a step 12, now you're at a step 9. So now you've got a lot longer time before you'll ever max out, because we go to, like I said, a 25. So this really gave people a longer time before they would max out. We didn't change our actual step plan at all, other than moving people to a new grade into a new step, is what we did. That was kind of where we did. We didn't change the step plan itself at all. We found our minimums that were close to what we had on these, like I said, what the county had, and we used those.
Well, in any wage and comp study I've ever been involved in, there's something called compression. And you know, you're gonna have that because, again, going back to using an example of just a person that mows the lawn, okay? Somebody that has 3 years of experience mowing a lawn is probably gonna be about as good as somebody that's got 10 or 20 years. Just that, you know, you're gonna do that. So, over time, the compression happens. That person, rather than reward tenure, you're gonna reward performance. So over time, the person that has been here less time may end up making more money than the person because they're a better worker. But taking all the personalities out, if you take the names off, and Danny, I understand, and we're not putting names, but taking the numbers off of these, and just the ranges themselves, if we decide that a job is worth what Nanette just gave me, you know, this is a grade 17, you know, the old minimum was 39.68, the new minimum's 33.666. That's, to me, that's the right way to do that, is to shift those ranges. Where somebody falls in that range is gonna dictate, if somebody falls out of that range, obviously, they gotta be brought up to that minimum. But if somebody's already in that range, it looks like everybody's getting an increase based on this.
Well, what we had to do is place somebody, if we moved the grade to 17, we had to place them in that new grade. So we found whatever was the closest as far as our step plan and put them in that step, because the numbers are different on a step 3 for 15 or a step 3 for 17. So maybe you were a step 3, but your current rate in the grade 17 made you a step 2.
And you made those adjustments when you calculate the new midpoint? Does that follow the transition that you made in the steps?
We didn't change the step
Right.
plan at all. We found, like I said, we used, like I said, the minimums. When we came over here and we said, okay, the new minimum for the accountant is now gonna be 33,666. So we found that on the step plan, on our current step plan. We didn't change it at all. We found the minimum that was closest to that, I guess you'd say, or maybe that is the one, I can't remember. And we said, okay, that's gonna now be a 17. It was a 15, but now it's a 17. And that person currently makes this amount. So we went out to a step that we could find that was as close to that, you know, not going under, going, you know, over if have to, and we found them a new step. That's why, like I said, you see where they probably went down a few steps.
But when I'm looking at the comparison of the two sheets we were just given, and we now have a new minimum, a new maximum, and a new midpoint. Now, is the new minimum, the minimum you're proposing,
Yes, sir.
the maximum is the maximum that would include all the step increases?
That's
Took
correct.
us out to the
And
25.
the new midpoint is simply the average of the two?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
It doesn't reflect the number of staff persons that you have and their current pay range?
no.
It would be more informative to us to see where the scatter would be for current pay versus proposed pay, so we can see what's happening across the board, not just individual descriptions.
Okay.
What's happening to the pool of people that we have in that group? What's the midpoint that we're paying, not the midpoint of the proposal? Is that, are you gathering
Yeah, I think I'm following what you're.
I'm really trying to see what the visual impact is going to be when we see what actually is going to hit our budget
Okay.
in a difference.
This is what hits our budget, but you just want to see where they're scattered,
Are you following what I'm asking for?
I think.
'Cause the
Because,
midpoint doesn't reflect the adjustments that you're making in the grades. It's just the average of the two.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't show factually where our employees are in their grades.
Okay, and so you want to see kind of like how many we have, how many are in grade 17 and where they are in grade 17?
Not individually, but as an impact by what group they're in.
Well,
I'd
if
like
you-
the midpoint to reflect actual pay scales as they will be adjusted rather than the average of the two.
Okay. I'm not quite sure, but like I said,
well,
something that
if
you,
you do it that way on this, then you'll have to change that scale every time somebody gets a step. For the midpoint, this midpoint
Yeah.
is an established range. No matter.
Yeah.
Midpoint is used for is determine, where does that employee fall in relation to his midpoint? And so if I've been here 3 years, I might be 92% of my midpoint. If I've been here 15 years, I might be 110% of my midpoint, but still less than the max. So the midpoint, what confuses me, I guess, is the grade. How are you using the grade? What's your definition of the grade? Because again, the wage and comp plans that I've seen, the grade stays the same because it's the internal relationship between positions. My position's a grade 5 because it's less important than this person's position that's a grade 10. So internally, we're comparing those. What shifts is that range. Unless my job changes, the job description, my job title and job description stays a 5. His stays a 10, but my range might shift from $10 to $15 an hour to 11 to 16. His might change from 15 to 25 to 17 to 27 or something. So I guess what's kind of confusing me, and I apologize that I'm not grasping it, but the grade and the step, and we're going up in grade and down in step, and I'm getting confused by it. I apologize.
so
but-
what you're saying is what you would have thought you would have seen is the grades would have stayed the same, but maybe the minimum, like if the accountant was a grade 15, the new minimum for grade 15 would be the 33,666.
That's the way I've always
Instead
think. The
of
grade
seeing-
stays the same because the grade actually is the internal comparison between positions. How important is that position? How important is that position? How important is that position? And there's a grade associated with that. And then there's a range associated with every grade 5 position and every grade 10 position, every grade 15 position. But over time, might be every year or might be every other year, that range changes. So the person that has been here 25 years is not going to max out and then be told, and again, I know that step process is something different that I've not been familiar with, but that somebody's not going to max out and then be told, you're maxed out. You're making $20 an hour, and that's what the job pays, and unless you change to a different job, you're never going to make more than $20 an hour. So the range shifts based on the market, and we do the same thing with drivers, and the comparison that we have in the market, we got to make sure that our ranges shift accordingly to keep up with the market, and where people aren't leaving our business to go, whether it's CDL drivers or landscape people or mechanics or whoever, to go somewhere else. So, but the entire range shifts, and how people are impacted by that range shift depends on how long they've been with us and where they fall within that range. Somebody that's near the top end of the range, like Danny was talking about, it gives them more room within that range. Somebody in the lower end, a lot of times, what I was talking about dropping out, our minimum was $10 an hour, and then that changed, and somebody had been here for a couple of years, and they were making $10.75. Well, the new minimum's 11, so they're at least going to be brought up to the 11 because we don't want to hire a new person that's
Right.
making more than somebody that's been here 3 years.
And that's kind of what we did, but we have this step plan here.
Okay?
And so we were directed not to change the minimums, to leave that alone. But so in order to come up to the new minimums, we had to change the grade. So for the accountant, they went up to 33,666. So we couldn't change to grade 15, which is 30,968. So we had to find where can we put them to get to the new one. So which is why we changed the grades. So I understand what you're saying, and we basically did that, but we did it to do the grades. The other thing that allowed is now that person has a lot longer to get to their 25, because our steps only go 25, and you're correct. When you get to 25, you don't go any further. That's the maximum.
So what I was asking for, and Danny missed the point because he thought I was suggesting a new scale. What I was really looking was for a weighted midpoint, which reflected what the pay would be. Since some are going to be at the minimum, some are going to be at the maximum, we don't know where people are in that 25 scale. So what will the weighted average be that we'll be paying in these positions?
Okay, that's something I can come up with. for you.
That's what I'm
Okay.
asking.
And that's
For informational,
Yeah.
not to change your
Right.
data, or just so I can see between the accountant position, new minimum's 30 and the new maximum's 54, are we paying 42 currently, or will we be weighted higher or lower because of where our employees are in their steps? If that makes any sense to you. So I'm asking for a revised midpoint that would be weighted to what our actuals are.
Okay. And
That's where I was
can-
trying to drive.
And I can get that for you. Like I said, that makes sense to, that makes sense to me. Like I
And
said,
if I
Trying to
understand
create-
correctly, the objective was twofold. Hiring people in the jobs that are critical at a competitive rate that, you want to be able to pay what the going rate is. If we're way low, then that needs to be adjusted, no question about that. And to be fair, we don't want to hire somebody at a higher rate than somebody that's been here for a while. So just as an example, if I'm in one of the positions that there's a lot of people in that position, I don't know what that would be, but there's a,
HEO two.
okay? So, and I've been here 15 years. And so obviously I've received raises over that time, and the person that's being hired is going to be hired at a new minimum. But if I've been here 15 years, that means I'm also getting my pay adjusted, I think, is what I'm reading here.
Correct. Well, I think I know where you're going with this, and I can give you one example that we ran into, which I think it answers this with these people talking about falling off the scale. We have a driver that's been here probably 2 years, and now with changing the minimum, even though he's been here 2 years, his current rate of pay is below what the new minimum is.
Right.
So now we're gonna bump him up to the
I-
new minimum.
I agree
But
with that.
But that's all he's going to be. So the new guy that comes in tomorrow is gonna be making the exact same amount as the gentleman that's been here for 2 years.
But if I've been here 15 years and now or do you have anybody that's been here a long period of time?
We do.
Okay, so I've been here 15 years,
Look at HO3.
and now I'm at my midpoint maybe of that.
Mm-hmm. Now you're probably not anymore, because you've gone to a new grade, and so now you've fallen below the minimum, because now, normally you would be on, if you've been in
Not
that
below the
same position.
minimum after
Well, not below the
15
minimum, but
years.
I'm saying if you've been here 15 years, normally you would be at about step 15. If you started in that same job and you've been here 15 years, you'd be at step 15. But now you're probably falling back to maybe step